Alright, so welcome back to our podcast. I'm the gentleman here with the disturbed Southern Belle,
Howdy do.
and today we will continue discussing the lesser known stories of the Scandinavian or Norse gods. So, our first story today will be focused on Loki again, and I am starting to see a pattern that most of the stories that I find or we find, are centered around Loki. And almost everyone has been about how he does something beneficial for the gods.
Agreed. He is really the man who seems to get things done. He's the one that they keep picking for these tasks. So, yeah, definitely I can see that he would continue to play that role.
And this time it's time for a change, I thought. So today we will be discussing a prank that he pulled on the goddess Sif, who, for those who don't know, is the goddess of fertility, and also the wife of Thor, the god of thunder.
Aha.
So, the Loki's prank was to shave off Sif's hair, which you can imagine Thor and Sif didn't take that too well.
Well, who would? I mean, who would really want your head shaved in most cases, especially a woman? But okay.
Actually, it's kind of funny because this made Thor so mad that he threatened to crush every bone in Loki's body.
Hmm. Well, that might be a bit far, considering the hair would grow back
Hmm,
fairly quickly, or possibly even quicker than we would anticipate since she is a goddess. But yeah, that's a bit harsh punishment there.
agreed. So, what Thor actually ended up doing was making a deal with Loki after Loki had proceeded to beg. He actually offered to go to Svartalfheim, the land of the dwarves, to have a headpiece or a wig made by the sons of Ivaldi, one of the better known dwarven craftsmen at the time. So once the deal had been made, Loki traveled to Svartalfheim and had put in an order for the hair and a couple of other items, one of which some of you may recognize as Odin's spear, Gungnir, as well as a ship whose name I can't even pronounce. It actually was able to shrink to the size that you could fit in your pocket, and it always had, to quote the actual story, the best wind in its sails. So, in admiration of the dwarves' craftsmanship, Loki went to another pair of brothers who, again, some of you might recognize from the 2016 game, God of War, Brock and Sindri. So Loki had manipulated the dwarves using their need to be the best at what they do by saying that they could never achieve the greatness that the sons of Ivaldi have. And he managed to get them to craft some more items for him.
Okay, so I guess this is where the trickster god comes in. He's using his trickster ways to manipulate them, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And actually, to Loki's credit, he does kind of come through with something in the end.
Well, okay.
So Loki and the dwarves had struck a deal where if they would craft him the items he requested, he would give them his head.
So, what would be the reason for giving them his head? I mean, what?
No idea.
That's a weird, a weird bargaining chip. But alrighty. So he's gonna give them his actual head off his body.
Yeah,
Okay.
to admit I may have missed something in my research because this isn't making much sense. I don't understand what he could possibly what reason he would have to make this deal. Anyway, the dwarves had actually split up to make the items Loki had requested in order to make them on time. And while the brother Sindri works on a golden boar named Gullenburst, who may cover in a later story if I can find anything really interesting on it. But anyways, Brock had worked or started working on a ring that would actually multiply itself 8 times every 9 days. A solid gold ring named Draupnir, which may, or some of you may actually recognize, again, was mentioned in God of War.
Yeah, I do remember that vaguely.
Then, once those two items had been finished, Loki had Sindri start work on a hammer that would eventually be Mjolnir, Thor's legendary hammer. Then Loki's trickster nature, I guess, had gotten the better of him, and he shapeshifted into a fly and bit Sindri on his eyelid, which had not exactly the intent or the effects Loki had intended. His original intent was to try to make them miss their deadline, but all it really ended up doing was causing Mjolnir to have a shorter handle than Sindri had originally wanted. Then the dwarves and Loki started traveling back to Asgard to distribute or to give the gifts to the gods. However, Loki had intended on cheating the dwarves of their bet, and he took the gifts and went on ahead. So, once Loki had reached Asgard, he gave the spear and the ring to Odin, the hammer and Sif's hair to Thor, and he gave the ship and the boar to a god named Freyr, who was the god of peace and fertility.
So he kept nothing for himself. He gave everything away that he got from them.
Surprisingly, yeah.
Well, that is interesting. Not really what I thought he would do in that case. I figured he would probably want to weasel something for himself as well, but okay.
Actually, I think he did. I think he was just happy to keep his neck by the end of the story. So, the way the story ends is the dwarves had called up and had demanded payment. But Loki said that he had promised them his head, but his head was attached to his neck. And he didn't say anything about his neck, so, eh.
So they couldn't have his head because it was attached to the neck,
Yeah,
but they couldn't remove the neck.
apparently not.
And they were okay with this.
Apparently so.
That is interesting. So that's how Thor got his mighty hammer.
Yep. And Odin his spear, and yeah.
Huh? Very interesting. All right.
Also, for those who are interested, Freyr is actually the son of Skadi and Njord from the last episode. So, if you're interested in that and you hadn't heard it, go check that out. So, that's it for this story. Do you have any words you want to say about it?
It was interesting to say the least. Kind of didn't really turn out how I thought it would. Figured that the dwarfs would have been more upset by not getting payment for the items they crafted, but apparently they were okay with it. So I guess all's well that ends well.
Well, I think, and I might be wrong about this, might be getting my stories mixed up. I think they did sew his mouth shut after he cheated them.
Ah, well, so I guess he got something for it then.
Yep, they definitely got something. If you have any questions or any thoughts on the story, be sure to leave a comment and I will get back to you on it, try to get you the answers that you want to know. And for our next story, well, in the last story you heard how Mjolnir got made, and this one, Mjolnir had actually gotten stolen from Thor. And this one's kind of a funny one, and it's bound to have some people laughing, I can guarantee that. So I'm sure some of you, and actually probably a lot of you, have heard something or seen something, a joke, a meme, something about Thor cross-dressing and in a wedding gown. The origins of that is one day Thor had discovered his hammer had gotten stolen by a giant, and not just any giant, actually. It was the king of giants, or the king of Jotunheim.
I always heard, I guess that is what's confusing me, that he was, Thor was the only one that could pick the hammer up.
Nope, that is something that was purely made by Marvel.
Oh,
In reality, it was just like really, really heavy.
okay. So in the mythology, it's just really heavy, but then Marvel made it to where he was the only one that could wield it, basically.
Yep,
Oh,
Marvel was the one that created that whole only the worthy shall be able to wield this hammer.
got it, got it. Okay, that makes sense then.
In reality, I don't think there was even any real enchantment, I guess, put on the hammer, other than the fact that it would allow Thor to more accurately use the lightning and stuff.
Right, got it. Okay.
Um, Anyways, the hammer Mjolnir had gotten stolen by the king of the Jotuns, Thrymr, who he kind of had a thing for Freya, the goddess of love, and he was using the hammer as leverage. He wanted to make a deal, a trade, Freya for the hammer. And that made everybody mad. Freya more so, because for some reason she found him repulsive. I don't know if he was just ugly or if it was because he was a Jotun and
Or it could be she just didn't want to marry this person. I mean, she's kind of being forced to do it, correct?
yeah, I'm just kind of stuck on the wording because it's many of the stories I've read have specified that she found him just repulsive.
Well, okay. Well, then maybe he wasn't attractive to her as well for some
Yeah,
reason.
assuming that's it.
Right.
Anyways, the giant would only give Thor back his hammer if Freya would give him her hand in marriage.
This has got me thinking back on the deal that was made for Freya
And the giant
and
who
the giant.
created
Right.
Asgard.
Yeah.
Yeah, which actually was our very first story on my side. The first story that I narrated.
Right. So now she's being offered. Well, no, she's not being offered this time.
No,
That's just what
she's
he's
being
demanding.
demanded.
Okay. So it's different this time. The first time they offered her as a
Yeah,
prize, and this time they're just being, the giant's just saying, "Hey, I want Freya."
yeah,
So she's pretty hot, apparently. Hot commodity.
apparently so.
Okay.
Well, that and she's literally the goddess of love.
Right.
So she's
And
got that going for her.
beauty and all that, I'm sure would probably be a big factor in that as well. So yeah, sure. I'm sure she's very beautiful and everything. So yeah, definitely.
So Freya was actually so mad about this that her necklace just shattered. Not even touching it, her anger was so
Forceful.
forceful, yeah, that her necklace just shattered.
That's interesting. I mean, I guess that's some of her power then really at work. I don't know if you want to mess with this woman or not.
No,
She doesn't sound like she's all love and beauty, huh?
she's definitely got some power.
Oh, definitely.
So, seeing Freya's rage at the thought of having to marry Thrymr, the gods had convened, tried to figure out a solution that wouldn't require them to part with the goddess of love. And I am really surprised because Loki, once again, is the man who figured out a plan.
Oh, yes, Loki, our man to get the things done.
Of course, now who else?
Loki, Loki, Loki. Man, he pops up everywhere, doesn't he?
Yeah, really though. And I'm not kidding when I say this episode, or this episode, the last episode, everything but the first episode wasn't supposed to be about Loki. Just all of these stories just ended up being about
About
this
Loki.
god.
So even the other gods' myths still involve Loki somewhere. He is very popular then.
Apparently so.
It's kind of cool though. I can see why he has his own series and everything then as much because he was a very popular god who had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, the genius that he is, once again, Loki's plan was to have Thor dress up as Freya in a bridal gown, and he was going to infiltrate Thrymir's castle and get his hammer back. However, Loki then decided that he wanted to go with him, and he disguised himself as a bridesmaid.
Oh my God. Are you serious? So
Yeah,
they're going to pass Thor off as Freya, the god of love and beauty. The goddess, I'm sorry. Oh,
yeah, and it works.
it does. Oh, wow. Okay.
So what happens is Thor and Loki make their way to Jotunheim and manage to get into the castle. And the only reason this works is one, because Loki decided to tag along. That actually ended up being
Beneficial? Oh,
the
wow.
only reason this worked.
Hmm.
Because Thor, the, well, genius, I say that sarcastically, the genius that he was behaving very much like he normally does, rather than trying to pass as a lady.
Oh my God. So he's acting like Thor, just wearing a dress.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
what he did, he drank so much, and he ate most of the wedding buffet.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Loki managed to cover him and say that it's just because she had been starving herself because of pre-wedding jitters.
Okay. Well, I guess that would make sense. Sure. Why not?
What takes this even further is that Thor got away with a kiss from Thrymir.
Okay.
The only reason I think that he was able to pass as a bride in the first place, like pass as a bride, is because of the outfit.
Right.
Because they're not like what women typically wear,
Mm-hmm.
like nowadays. It was so like big.
Right.
Like standard wedding dress, yeah. It was so frilly and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It had a veil, everything like that. It had so much jewelry.
Oh.
And with the veil, Thor was able to keep his face covered pretty much the entire time. And then Thrymir had asked for a kiss. And the only thing the Jotun noticed was Thor's eyes and how they were dark rimmed, like he had bags under his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And Loki once again made an excuse that it was because she had been very nervous and she hadn't got any sleep the past few days.
Oh my God. So he notices nothing other than she's got some dark circles under her eye. Her eyes?
Yeah. I think the biggest reason the biggest reason he never noticed anything is because he had been blinded by the fact that he thought he was going to get away with this.
Oh.
He thought he was going to get the goddess of love.
Hmm.
And he'd been blinded by the, at the time, apparent success of his plan and just his infatuation with the goddess.
Yeah. Okay. So he's just seeing what he wants to see, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hmm.
Which, honestly, having such a fascination with her, you'd think he wouldn't confuse Thor for her.
Well, yeah, you would definitely think he would know what she looked like.
Seeing as how
More.
their bodies are completely different.
That
Because
too.
Thor is big.
Right. I would imagine so. So yeah, that's interesting. Definitely. Strange. I don't know why he wouldn't have recognized her, but like I said, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and apparently he was fine with what he saw.
Apparently so. Everything was going fine until Thor had managed to get a hold of his hammer. Then he proceeded to kill everybody there. just starting with Thrymir.
Okay, why would he do this?
They stole his hammer.
So he just, oh my god. So he just dresses up there just to get in so he can get the hammer back and kill.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. That's an interesting take on burglary, I guess. Alright.
Hmm. Alright, so our next story is one that's actually kind of different. This one's not about how Loki did something good. This is about one of his more infamously bad moments. So I'm sure some of you recognize the name Baldur. He's the first boss you fought in the 2018 God of War, which we are referencing a lot. He's not how he's depicted in that game. He's supposed to be the god of joy. He's one of the better ones. And he's actually depicted as the god of light, purity, peace, and forgiveness, which is odd considering he's the son of Odin, one of the more, as I've said before, war-focused gods. He's kind of the most beloved god on Asgard. So, according to the Norse mythologies or the Scandinavian lore, everything, be it living or not, is in a way sentient. Like people, animals, or as a non-living example, rocks. Anyways, back to the story at hand. Baldur started having nightmares about his demise, his death, and this had actually scared the gods a bit because, according to a few stories, Ragnarok was supposed to start with Baldur's death.
So Ragnarok, that's like the end of the world.
Yep, that is the apocalypse.
And that is supposed to start after Baldur dies or Baldur, and he's having dreams of his death.
Yep,
And so now everyone's kind of getting worried.
yeah.
Oh, I could see that definitely then.
Especially because a lot of the times the gods' dreams are actually prophecies.
Right. Right. That's true too. So yeah, I can see why people might be starting to get a little anxious and worried. Definitely. Okay.
So once Baldur had confronted the gods of his dreams, they convened and had decided to send Odin to visit a seeress that had long since died.
So a seeress is like a oracle, fortune teller type person.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And she had died.
Yep, she was in the underworld.
Okay. And he's going to find her. Okay. Got it.
So Odin would disguise himself so that way he wouldn't be recognized by the seeress or oracle. And he would travel to the underworld to try to get her to help him figure out Baldur's dreams. And upon arriving to the underworld, Odin had seen a banquet hall that had been set up as if they were going to hold a feast, which, for some who don't know, great feasts would take place in the underworld when someone of great reputation passed, as sort of a reward for their life well lived. So the seeress would actually end up confirming Odin's fears, and he would pretty much just rush back to Asgard to spread the news of Baldur's impending demise.
Okay, so Odin has went to the underworld. He's talked to the seeress, and she has basically said that the end of the world is coming, more or less.
Yep,
Right. So now he's just scared to death and just ran back to Asgard and don't know what to do, basically.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, this had sent Frigg, who was Odin's wife and his mother, into a state of distress, for lack of a better word.
I guess it sent everyone into a state of distress.
Yeah, it actually did, which is kind of worse because everyone loved Baldur, and his death signals the end of them all.
Right. It
So it's
is.
kind of a double whammy for them.
Right. Exactly.
So Frigg was a witch more than anything else, and she had a way of speaking to the non-living entities in the nine realms. So what Frigg did is she set out to make sure that everything living and non-living swore an oath that they would not do any harm to Baldur, which would actually end up making him pretty much invincible. But the one thing that didn't agree not to harm him was a mistletoe. So that's pretty much his one weakness.
That's kind of weird. So mistletoe is his Achilles heel, sort of like in that
Yeah,
myth. All right. That's interesting. Okay. So that's like Achilles' mother when she dipped him in the river Styx, she held him by his heel and that made him weak in that one little spot. And so basically the mistletoe is the only thing in the world that is not said that they would not harm Baldur at some point.
yeah,
So that's the only weakness he has. So he's Superman, kryptonite, all that. Here we go.
yep. So the gods, upon hearing that Baldur was more or less invincible, had did the only thing that you can really do in that scenario. They made a sport out of trying to kill him.
Oh, well, what else can you do, right? Couldn't imagine anything else to do at that point. Why not?
Yep, I mean he's pretty much invincible.
There you go.
Why not test fate?
Sure.
So I'm sure you can probably guess where this is going. Loki had talked to Frigg and seeing an opportunity for mischief, he got her to tell him what or about the mistletoe and how it was the only thing that could harm Baldur now. And he managed to fashion a spear from the mistletoe, which he then gave to the blind god. He had actually managed to convince the blind god, whose name is Hoder, to throw the spear because he had been left out of the festivities due to, not being able to see.
Of course.
And so Loki had essentially helped him aim it, and Hoder threw the spear, which then impaled Baldur, killing
Oh
him
my
instantly.
God. Why would he do this?
He had no idea what the spear was made of, but I don't see why any of them would have done this to begin with.
No. Why would Loki even want to give him the spear or anything? Oh my God. This
No
is
idea.
silly, stupid, but
No
okay.
stories I have read have ever given a motive other than Loki wanted to cause chaos.
Well, that would be the ultimate chaos, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Loki, which just, according to every story, Loki causes Ragnarok. So,
Well, I guess so. He's wanting it to happen then, apparently.
apparently so. And if any of you are expecting Thor to get revenge for his brother, he doesn't. He is once mentioned in the story, and it's just supporting role. So
No.
Thor's just more or less
Yeah.
absent from this. Apparently not. He attends the funeral, he assists, but that's about it.
Okay, well then what stops Ragnarok if Baldur's dead?
I don't know. That's not mentioned in this story.
Does it actually start or
Not sure. I don't think it does. I think that this is just a prophecy or something. Ragnarok was just a prophecy.
okay.
So this event doesn't really kick off Ragnarok. So,
So they
eh.
just thought it would and then when he actually died it didn't happen, more or less.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's weird.
Another thing is there's no real specific time Ragnarok was supposed to happen after Baldur's death. So theoretically, it could still be just on the way, even to this day.
Well, that's kind of weird then. So it could happen anytime.
Yeah. Could happen 10 seconds from us recording, 10 seconds from the
Right.
listeners hearing it.
That's weird. That's strange. Interesting, though. That is very crazy. I
Yeah.
like that story.
Mm.
That's kind of like as it ties into some other myths and things like with Achilles and different things. And so that's interesting. Very interesting.
Well, if you like the story, well, we're only halfway through, so got plenty more to do.
All right. Let's go.
Anyways, as you can imagine, the sudden death of Baldur just immediately shocked everyone, which sent Frigg into a panic. She just completely shut down for a while, but once she had regained her composure, so to speak, she had spoken to the gods and asked if any of them were willing to travel to the underworld to make or to speak with Hel, the goddess of death. So the god who had actually agreed to undertake this task was Baldur's other brother, Hermod. Hermod, not entirely sure how to pronounce his name. He had really wanted to bring Baldur back for obvious reasons. Or maybe not so obvious, seeing as how Thor didn't seem to care. Or maybe he just was happy he was out of the picture. Maybe Thor just was jealous. But getting a bit sidetracked here. This isn't really important to the story, I guess. And for the sake of understanding, and since I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, I'll be referring to Hermod as Baldur's brother. Anyways, with Baldur's brother agreeing to go on this mission, Odin had granted him the use of his steed, Sleipnir, who, once again, we covered in an earlier episode. I think the first episode I hosted, if you want to go check that out. He had actually spent 9 days going to the underworld, and while all this was happening, the gods had actually performed the funeral for Baldur. And it was reasonably standard funeral, Viking funeral, anyways. They turned Baldur's ship into a giant pyre, pretty much, and placed his body on top of it. And his ship was so heavy that they had to actually get the strongest being in creation, who was actually a giantess named Hirokin. And she was the one that had to eventually push the ship off. And then, upon lighting it, Thor, playing the very minuscule part he does, held his hammer over the fires and sort of hallowed it, I guess. And Baldur's wife actually died from sadness or heartbreak, whatever you want to call it. So they ended up putting her body up in the ship with Baldur and sending them off together.
Well, this is so it's a traditional Viking funeral in that they lit his ship on fire and placed his body on it. But then his wife dies at the funeral as well from sadness and heartbreak, and they have to place her body on the ship as well.
Yeah,
That's really sad.
it is. This is actually a fairly sad story compared to the ones that we've covered previously.
Right. Yeah, this one's kind of taking a dark turn, but okay.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better. Loki kind of screws everyone over again.
Imagine
And
that.
yeah, really though. Also, Baldur's wife is never again mentioned. They make no attempt to get her back, just Baldur.
Oh, okay. So she's just left to fend for herself then.
Yep, she is left to rot in the realm of the dead.
Well,
Well, not rot, but nah.
right. I get it.
Also, to kind of lighten the mood, something I forgot to mention earlier, the giantess Hirokin actually arrived to Asgard on the back of a giant wolf using a poisonous snake for reins.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
She
talking
made,
about making an
yeah,
entrance.
she definitely made a heck of an entrance then.
Also, Gungnir, the ring from previous story that we covered, Odin had actually placed it into the flames to send it off with Baldur. So that just kind of speaks to how much Odin actually cared for him.
Right. So that was the ring that could actually replicate itself.
Yep, 8 times every 9 days,
Well, that's
forged by Brock and Sindri.
wow. So he was definitely broken up.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, actually, when you think about it.
It is.
And seeing how this happened to the best of the gods,
Right.
the one who was actually never really a bad guy in any of the stories that I've read.
Exactly.
And as testament of just how many creatures liked Baldur, pretty much every species, save for the Jotuns, because the Jotuns are assholes, they actually came to mourn Baldur's passing. So that means the dwarves, the giants, the Valkyries, the elves, and pretty much every
So
god.
pretty much everyone.
Yeah,
Right.
save for the Jotuns.
Right. So that is sad.
And while all this was happening, Baldur's brother rode into the underworld, and he arrived to a bridge that crossed the river Yol. Again, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce this. Either way, it's kind of the Norse version of the Greek river Styx.
Oh, okay. So the river of
And
death, basically.
yeah, pretty much. And there was a bridge that passed over it, which was guarded by a giantess, who asked Hermod who he was and why he was traveling the underworld. And he told her why he was there. She let him pass with surprisingly no trouble at all, which was pretty good, a pretty pleasant change.
I guess so, yeah. So that was one easy leg of the journey, I suppose.
Yeah, 9 days to get there, and he actually didn't encounter any resistance.
Wow.
So, upon arriving through the underworld, past the gate, he had encountered Hel, and she was sitting atop her throne, and beside her was actually Baldur, who was looking pretty bad, which, duh, he's
Yeah,
dead.
right.
And this feast was set out, and Baldur wasn't really enjoying it at all. He was still processing the fact that he was dead.
Right.
And so Baldur's brother had started to try to negotiate with Hel, and he told her how everything was mourning the loss of Baldur and how sad everyone was. And so they struck a deal where if everyone or everything cried for Baldur, if everything shed a tear for him, she would let him go. And with this news, Hermod had traveled back to Asgard. And arriving back to Asgard, he told them of the deal, and Frigg had sent out messengers all over the Nine Realms to try to get everyone to cry. And everyone did, with the exception of one giantess. The giantess's name was Talk, and after telling the messenger that, and I quote, "Hell can keep what she has," the giantess revealed herself as the one and only Loki.
What a shock.
Yeah, mm,
So basically, he has transformed himself now into a giantess and is refusing to cry for Baldur so he can come back from the land of the dead.
yeah. Don't know why he transformed. He ended up revealing himself in the end, so it's not like he wanted to hide.
I don't know. He just loves being weird, I suppose. It seems as though, anyway.
Yeah, a lot of his stuff is just weirdness rather than trickery. I mean, a lot of it's trickery, and it kind of ties in, but it's mostly weirdness.
Right.
He's the god of weird.
Well, I guess they would be looking for Loki and this giantess, so that would, cause more chaos
Well, yeah, I guess so.
if they didn't
If they
right off,
couldn't find Loki.
right, if they
Yeah.
didn't initially know that this was Loki as well. Okay.
And with Loki refusing to cry, this doomed Baldur to hell forever. He stayed in the underworld. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of our story, I guess.
So because Loki would not cry as the giantess, then then Baldur has to stay in the underworld forever.
Yep, he belongs to hell now.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah,
And it
kind
was
of
his,
a depressing ending.
yeah, and it was kind of his fault that he's dead to start with.
Yeah, he essentially killed him. He didn't
Thoroughly,
physically, he
yeah,
didn't throw the spear, but he made it.
but he
He
pretty
did
much,
the research.
yeah, he pretty much threw the spear because he guided it
He may as
from a
well.
blind guy.
He may as well have threw the
Well,
spear.
that's well, I don't know if I like this one so much at all then because it does kind of have a sad ending, doesn't it?
Yep, shows just how cruel Loki can actually be, though.
Yeah, he really can be. That sucks.
Yeah. Anyways, like I said, this I guess brings us to the end of the story and this episode. So if you have any questions or any stories you want me to cover, be sure to leave a comment and I will do the research. I'll look into the stories and I will tell them. And if you have any like questions you want answered, we will do a kind of an episode where we take everybody's questions and we answer them all kind of a Q&A style. And I guess this kind of concludes my saga, I guess. Next week will be hosted by the Disturbed Southern Belle.
Yep, we are going to start delving into our childhood fairy tales and nursery rhymes, the Grimm's brothers, all of that. We're going to take a deep dive and look into the origins and the actual stories behind the stories that we've known all of our lives and have grown to love, and how twisted they really are in reality.
Mm. And I personally love the Grimm stories. They are a very good twist, kind of a horror
Oh,
thing.
yeah. Yeah, we got Mother Goose coming up and also Hans Christian Andersen.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
Yeah. So we definitely invite you back. It's going to be some extended episodes on that. Definitely check back with us. We're going to drop another episode, and that's what we're going to be covering. And we'd love for you to come back and join us. And don't forget to
Stay disturbed.